Currently known for The Big Short, Michael Burry will soon be recognized for The Big Short 2. The biggest financial disaster in U.S. history is what Burry is currently banking on. Yes, the collapse we're discussing is worse than the Great Recession, the dot-com bubble, the Great Inflation, and the 2008 recession combined. Burry expects the largest decrease in corporate profits and the mother of all catastrophes. Within the next few months, the world will begin to recognize this problem, and Burry will once more reap billions from it. The biggest bull run in US history occurred over the last 13 years. Since 2008, the value of S&P 500 has climbed by more than 6 times. Growing liabilities were the driving force behind this unheard of price increase. Since 2009, the total public debt has risen to nearly $30 trillion. And while it's impossible to determine how much debt is too much, adding trillions of dollars in new debt every year is undoubtedly unsustainable. Along with the rising debt level, household savings have drastically decreased. Currently, the personal savings rate in the US is at levels not seen since 2008. Despite inflation, total personal savings have also decreased to levels not seen in almost a decade. It is quite alarming that overall savings are falling while the economy is growing by trillions of dollars. The consumer is becoming weaker and weaker every day, which is made worse by the fact that credit card debt is at all-time highs. U.S. personal savings plunged to 2013 levels, the savings rate to 2008 levels, while revolving credit debt climbed at record-setting pace back to pre-COVID peak despite all the trillions of dollars of cash poured in their laps. Michael Burry wrote this in a tweet. A consumer recession and new earnings problems are on the horizon. As the economy operates in a circular loop, a weaker consumer directly affects the sales of businesses. In the factor market, transactions are made by businesses and households exchanging labor for money. The product market, where consumers buy goods that firms sell, is the flip side of this. The product market will witness less activity as a result of the household's reduced purchasing capacity. Less product market demand will result in lower business profitability. Reduced corporate earnings will undermine the factor market, which will lower household income and once again impair the product market. Because one negative event could start an endless downward spiral, this feedback loop is positive. Since economic catastrophes can occur at any stage of the cycle, economists refer to this theory as the circular flow model. Imagine using the circular flow model as you would a bucket of water and one drop of food coloring. Within a few seconds, the entire bucket of water would have changed one color. Burry provides quantitative support for its argument that a recession will result from deteriorating consumer confidence. The lack of consumer spending will result in reduced business profits, lower household income, and even less savings, which is why Burry reaffirmed his point by illuminating the decline tendency of U.S. personal savings to GDP, graphing the GDP total / U.S. personal savings. The all-time low, shown in red, was achieved in July 2005 and stands at 1.5%. Between September and December of this year, given the rate savings that have been depleting during the past 12 months, that level could be reached. Time borrowing, a graph illustrating the personal savings to GDP ratio cyclical fall, is annexed to the tweet. Burry is certainly advocating for a recession driven by consumers, but he is not the only one. Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, once expressed his concern over the rising U.S. debt in 2019. At the time, the U.S. owed nearly $22 trillion in debt. In the last 3.5 years, that amount has grown by 36%, reaching the total of nearly $30 trillion. Through all of this is worrying, you might be asking through and through how severe of a collapse we're referring to. Prominent economists from throughout the world refer to comparisons between the current situations and the 1970s, where the US saw double-digit inflation. Due to the economy's experience of both high unemployment and high inflation, the 1970s are frequently referred to as a stagflationary era. Due to low consumer spending during this time, the misery index increased by a record amount. Imagine a time when you experience both being unemployed and seeking your money out, but seeing it being lost with all of its value. Although it might sound terrifying, Burry really thinks that things are much worse now than they were in the 1970s. Some people compare the US of today to the 1970s, according to Michael Burry. However, the baby boom after World War II led to a sharp increase in labor force participation during the 1970s. Today, we have the opposite. Despite a twofold increase in population, nuclear families and birth rates are at 1959 levels. The reason why Burry refers to the present as the opposite of the 1970s is due to two factors: the labor force participation rate and the birth rate. The 1950s is commonly called the baby boom because the fertility rate increased dramatically. This increased labor force and allowed for increased economic activity later on in the 1970s. Add a rapid increase in the labor force participation rate, and the economic environment wasn't as horrible as it seemed. The present is the opposite of this. Despite the fact that we have a population size that is 2 times larger than the 1970s, we have a birth rate that is half of that of the 1950s. Additionally, the labor force participation rate continues to decrease over time due to the Great Resignation. The Great Resignation was a period that started in the spring of 2021 when a massive amount of U.S. workers began quitting their jobs. The motives for these resignations included low pay, no advancement opportunities, disrespect, and many other reasons. So the 1970s was a terrible era with significant social unrest. However, imagine that what will happen in 2022 when we both have incredible stagflation and an incredibly weak labor market. Burry tweeted an article that stated that the parallels between the 2020s and the 1970s grow closer by the day. The economy faces the threat of stagflation, fuel prices are surging, and shortages loom. Politicians are flailing, the environmental and international environment is deteriorating. The Supreme Court is revisiting the 1970 Roe v. Wade ruling. The homicide rate is soaring among a general sense of social breakdown. The article pointed out 7 parallels between the 1970s and the present: stagflation, fuel prices, shortages, political turmoil, geopolitical tension, Roe v. Wade, and social breakdown. Burry is quoting this article to show how modern society has this crisis of stagflation. It is essentially similar to the 1970s, but much worse, and despite focusing on the 1970s, Burry actually sees characteristics in every single US crisis. In our current situation, he joked on Twitter by saying that a band named Slipknot started shooting the generals in September 2000, January 2008, and April 2022. While Burry was joking around about Slipknot's music videos, he believes that our current bubble is the ruler and the mother of all bubbles. He tweeted in late 2021 about how we have more speculation than the 1920s, more overvaluation than the 1990s, and more geopolitical and economic strife than the 1970s. Players grabbing a barrel of Kyle Richardson's house rifle, while the SEC and Federal Reserve nod approvingly. In addition, the similar characteristics to other crises, Burry also coined the current bubble the greatest speculative bubble of all time in all things by 2 orders of magnitude. Even though the economy is in a poor position, a strong government body can help alleviate some economic and social concerns, right? This does not apply with President Joe Biden. Most of the economists have complained and groaned about how Biden has been worsening government debt issues through high governmental spending. Biden's budget has reached to a total amount of $5.8 trillion, which is over 25% of the US total GDP. This level of spending during an inflationary period is simply going to greater escalate our current crisis. Burry complained about Biden's spending by wishing a real potato was president. Many say that the dollar index is increasing, and this means that the US dollar is in a strong position. However, the dollar index compares the US dollar to other fiat currencies. Fiat currencies are government-backed currencies like the Chinese yuan or the Russian ruble. Because we're in a global crisis, comparing the US to other international paper currencies is useless. We were warned about this by Burry's recent tweet. When you see the mention of the strong dollar, the almighty dollar, please remember this is only in relation to other fiat currencies. The dollar is not at all strong and is not getting stronger. We all see it every day in prices of everything. In other words, the US dollar is strengthening when compared to other fiat currencies, but when it's actually compared to actual real life items, the dollar is getting weaker by the day. Michael Burry's macroeconomic thesis is quite crystal clear, but not many actually listening to his warnings. One investor who didn't agree with Burry's hypothesis before the 2008 recession was Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett later regretted this and stated that he should have considered Michael Burry's hypothesis. Burry believes that this will happen again and tweeted a video where Buffett called him Cassandra. Cassandra is a Trojan priestess in Greek mythology that told true prophecies that nobody ever believed. Buffett called Burry Cassandra because Burry was telling a true prophecy that everyone took with a pinch of salt. Burry had bets against the market that allowed him to make billions in the 2008 recession, and he still has those bets now. While he does profit on market crashes, Burry doesn't enjoy the sight of them. As I said about 2008, it's like watching a plane crash. It hurts, it's not fun, and I'm not smiling. So now we know that Burry is predicting a market crash so large and so grand that it could lead to the Big Short too. But with that being said, how will Burry create the Big Short? How will he do that? According to his SEC filing, he is purchasing shares in stable inflationary resistant companies such as $20 million in a pharmaceutical company named Bristol Myers, roughly $18 million in both Facebook and Google stock, and a variety of other companies in a similar strong heavy-duty position. The two similarities between these companies is a strong moat and significant pricing power. Both of these factors will allow these companies to raise prices during an inflationary period while crushing the competitors. Burry also recently revealed that he has kept a put option on $35 million worth of Apple stock. This is most likely a hedge against its Facebook and Google position, as Apple will have to deal with increasing material costs while Facebook and Google do not. But more importantly, Burry more than likely has a substantial short position in the bond market, which he is not required to disclose to the public. Michael Burry is once again preparing his portfolio and himself to profit immensely in the coming months, and he may make billions once again. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!